Good morning. Our call to worship is from Nelson Mandela, speaking of his lifelong work to break the chains of oppression in South Africa. The reading is from the UU collection entitled Lifting Our Voices, which is a companion to the contemporary hymns in the Teal hymnal. It is especially fitting to read these words today as they echo the imagery of the last speech delivered by Martin Luther King Jr., whose life and liberatory message our nation celebrates tomorrow. Mandela reflects, I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can only rest for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibility, and I dare not linger, for my walk is not yet ended.
Our chalice lighting words. I got the signal. Our chalice lighting words are from Reverend Charles F. Flagg. You may remember them from the beloved conversations among commissioning that we did a year ago this month. He writes, every endeavor begins with the first step and encounters darkness and difficulty along the way. We know the darkness of ignorance, of fear, and of tyranny. Yet we know the dawning of the light, the beginnings of hope, and the renewal of life. May we gather together today and help each other to hold these contradictions in the days to come. (1020) in the Teal hymnal, Woyaya, a classic Oghanian highlight song that fuses African meters from all over the continent with Western jazz melodies. Rise as you are able.
My name is Christine Davis. I'm a member of this congregation's Beloved Conversations Among team. 1 year ago today, we were commissioned by the Unitarian Church of Lincoln to carry forward the work of anti-racism by identifying racism and other oppressions in our congregation and other institutions. Together with Mary Kay Stillwell, and on behalf of all the members of the Among team, some of whom are participating in today's service, I want to welcome you. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln aspires to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and the world. We have a big vision here, and we know that creating a loving community begins with welcome. So, whether this is your first time or your 500th, if you are here in person, on live stream, or listening later, if you came here hopeful or heartbroken, whatever your age, sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, whomever you love, wherever you are in life's journey, you are welcome here.
Our church has been on the long road to freedom, to use Nelson Mandela's words, for over 150 years. We can look back with pride at the distance that members, ministers, and friends of our church have come, even as we admit, as Mandela does, that we have sometimes faltered. The last year's UCL anniversary exhibit in the gallery testified to our journey. But as Mandela also reminds us, there are many, many more hills to climb. Friday's e-blast and the postcard we received in the mail this week invited us all to join together on the next leg of our journey. It's a journey toward spiritual wholeness, building up a diverse community. As you see from the text that's being projected, the eighth principle offers us a reminder to be more intentional and accountable to ourselves and each other as we continue our work to dismantle racism and other forms of oppression in ourselves, our congregations, and our communities. Over 200 UUA congregations across the U.S. have accepted the eighth principle, answering the grassroots call to renew the UU commitment to building a beloved community. What does that mean? We hope today's service will answer some questions, but we're all in the learning process together when it comes to discovering the meaning and value of the eighth principle to our own congregation here at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. We invite you to work with us to imagine creative ways our congregation can take this journey, as well to imagine what practices are needed for changes to occur. When you entered this morning, either an usher handed you or you found on your chair a 3x5 card and pen. If you don't have one, raise your hand and we'll make sure you get one. We good? Okay. As this service unfolds and our journey begins, no doubt feelings and thoughts and questions will arise. Please write them down on the card. At the end of the service, you can leave them on your chair or hand them to an usher as you leave. If you have really specific questions or concerns about any of the subject matter relating or that was raised during the service and would like to discuss them with one of the Among team, please make a note of that as well on your card and tell us the best way to contact you. And also include your name so we know who you are. Love is powerful is the name of the story for all ages today. Love is the fuel that carries us forward on our road to freedom.
If anyone would like to come forward for the story, you're welcome to do so now. You can see the pictures a little easier. Our story today is called Love is Powerful and was written by Heather Dean Brewer. Mari spilled her crayons onto the table. They made a messy rainbow. "What are we coloring, Mama?" Her mama smiled.
A message for the world.
Mari ran to the window and pressed her nose to the glass. Far below, people walked in different directions. Buses, cars, and taxis honked and grumbled down the busy street.
Mari asked,
"How will the whole world hear?" And her mama said,
"Well, they'll hear because love is powerful." Mari climbed onto her mama's lap. The crayons smelled sharp and new. Mama used one to write some letters. Even though Mama's words stretched across the poster, they would be too small for the world to read, Mari thought.
Mari picked up a crayon, and as she made her own sign, she imagined her friends in their apartments across the city, Grandma and Grandpa a plane ride away, and all the people in other countries. Mari wondered, how will the whole world see our message? But Mama hugged her close.
"Oh, they'll see," she said, "because love is powerful." Mama handed her a coat, and then they both laced up their shoes. Mari tucked the posters under one arm and held Mama's hand with the other. They slipped through the elevator doors. Down, down, down they went, all the way to the lobby.
Mari hopped onto the sidewalk and then stopped and looked up. The street was packed with people, more people than she'd ever seen in her entire life. Mari tugged on Mama's arm to ask her to kneel down, and then she whispered in Mama's ear, "Mama, it's so loud and there's so many people, they won't hear our message." But Mama said,
"Oh, they will, sweetheart. I know they will." Mama lifted Mari up, and for a moment she felt like she was flying. On top of Mama's shoulders, Mari could see the crowd swell for blocks, hundreds and thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people marching down the street.
Some held signs like Mari's, all saying different things. Everyone cheered as they walked together. Mama joined them, and Mari bobbed above the crowd like a canary fluttering over trees. She felt as tall as one of the buildings.
Mari raised her sign for everyone to see. Even though she was small and the crowd was very big, so big she didn't think anyone would hear, she called out her message.
And through the roar, her voice was heard, and someone shouted the message back. Mari yelled again, and more joined in. And again, she yelled the message.
This time, when the crowd called back, Mari's message rumbled down the street and echoed off the buildings. It was as loud as breaking waves. Love is powerful.
Can you all say it with us?
Love is powerful. And one more time. Love is powerful.
And that is the end of our story.
But there are more stories to be told. How will you tell them? What's your message to the world?
So next, if you would please rise in body or in spirit. Our next hymn is number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
131.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope is not. Okay, wait, we're going to pause for just a second. Let's pause for a second, because those of us who are looking at the screen are having a little trouble. There it is. Take two, Becky.
Okay, just a second.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the
Whoa, that was powerful. Thank you. Thank you. One central part of our service is the time we join together in community to mark the moments in our lives. We share our joys, our sorrows, the events that mark the steps, the stops, and the milestones along our way. The threads of sorrow and those of joys are intertwined in the fabric of our lives, present for each of us, remembered by each of us. When shared, your threads may be woven together with those of others in our community. In this way, our joys are magnified. We are comforted in our sorrows. I invite you to say out loud or type into the chat your name or the name of others, another, that may need our support as they experience a concern or sorrow. Christine will help out with comments from the live stream. Margie? Sharon. Karen? Karen. Sharon. Hey, I got to get my ear trumpet.
Wallen.
Pardon?
Wallen.
Wallen? Rolland.
John Weymouth.
John Weymouth. Thank you. Now, if there was something for my ears. The family of Rebecca Fairfield? Fyvie.
All those in California and Alabama who are suffering from the storms.
Oh, yes, all those in California and Alabama suffering from the terrible floods. The people in Ukraine. Care for Ricky and Donna Block. Now, say out loud or type into the chat your name or that of another who has joy to share.
Our son Patrick, who is not in California.
Our son, well, not our son, but Charlie's son, who is not in California where they're suffering from floods.
Where is he?
Patrick, who is visiting in Lincoln.
Chelsea for doing such a great job with the kids program.
Chelsea for doing such a good children's program. Yes, thank you.
All the OWL volunteers.
All the OWL volunteers, those wise people.
Ray was released from the neurologist in Omaha this week.
Ray was released from the neurologist in Omaha this week. 2 new kittens. Claire, who has not been seen for months. Oscar and Stacy. And Ailish, sure.
Our palliative care bill was introduced into legislation this week.
Palliative care bill was introduced to the legislature this week.
What is in that? Can we hear?
It's just the definition, because a lot of people don't really know what palliative care is.
Wife Barbara, who just had a birthday. Happy birthday, yeah. We have one more sorrow for all who knew and loved Tony Elliott. I also wanted, Christine mentioned, put a note on the card that we have 27 watching today. And among the joys that are repeated here and in the chat, all joy and good feelings and love go out to Oscar and family for their new journey. We know that some sorrows and joys cannot be shared in words, and there are parts of ourselves often unseen and unattended. In a time of shared silence, let us gather into our hearts what has been spoken and unspoken.
And I'm happy to add a straggling joy, which is it's such a long joy, I have to bring it over here. Joy and strength to the newcomers in Lincoln from Ukraine, Afghanistan, and elsewhere who are building their new lives. Now, each week, we take up an offering to support this congregation and our work in the world. You may give in several ways: by placing money in the bowls as they are passed by the ushers, or you may take out your cell phone and text UC Lincoln and the amount you wish to give to 73256. Or you may go online and donate through Realm on the church website. Your offering, in any way you choose to make it, is gratefully received while we listen to some beautiful music from Becky Sade. Thank you, Becky. Thomas Davis's poem, River of People, recounts a story shared with him by Cardi Manette, an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. Jack Briggs, also mentioned in this poem, was a writer for Tribal College, Journal of American Indian Higher Education. All three men devoted decades to the Tribal College movement. As Mary Kay said, today's service is part of a larger voyage we've been on for some 150 years as a religious community. From where we stand, we can see other hills that await our courage and imagination. We know how to do this, as it is another leg of the journey we began walking when the weather was a bit warmer, with amongst summer Indigenous programming. Whether or not you experience the summer programming, It might be helpful to think of this service as having sprouted from careful, intentional summer planting. Can I invite the readers up? Davis' story poem, River of People, goes like this.
There's this river, Cardi Monet said, that you see from the distance. And it looks shining and beautiful, a good place to visit. But when you walk up the banks, you see it's a river of people. And all of those people are in pain. And they're crying for themselves, or crying out for help, or they're sinking below terrible currents flowing toward a sea over hills, past mountains, around the bend. Some struggle for shore, arms flailing and bodies twisting, and a few make it. But even though a few make it to the riverbanks, it's still a river so big, it sometimes seems to be the world.
Some of those who find the river take one look and go back to their valley and woods where the sound of water helps them sleep at night. Others come to the river's bank and they reach out hands and start trying to save those closest to shore. Others see the river and it confuses them so much they get too close and they fall into the flow and join in the wail of suffering that makes earth tremble and mind recoil with anguish and fear.
Thank you, Bob. Those who grasp a hand and are saved from the river usually get away from it as fast as they can and find their way into the world where the sun rises every morning, and on a clear night, moonlight shines on still lakes' dark waters. But some others join the river's bank, and they start saving those few they can catch. And some of those who found the river and get out of the river keep reaching out to hands and minds while working upstream, trying to find the river's source. And in these people lies part of the world's hope.
I once told Jack Briggs before he died that he was one of the people who were in the river and turned around once he was on the bank and reached out to those he had left behind. I also told him he was one of those trying to find the river's source so that pain and trouble could be taken from waters and the river could flow free of people to a shining sea. But sometimes I stand on the banks of that river and I see faces of people I know, and I hear cries of those whom I love, and I feel myself slipping into the river's flow, and I have to turn around and reach out for other hands in an effort to save myself.
And in those times, in the grasp of other hands, I know the glory of humankind, even though cries of misery and pain fill my ears. And in those times, I lift my eyes to the hills and see a shining horizon and a wing-spread golden eagle's wheeling flight, making alive cloudless blue skies. In those times, I search for hope and listen to the songs of healing my wife has sung. And I know the river of people is in this world, but not the world. There are valleys where yellow meadows shine amidst the gentle darkness of great forests, And there are villages and towns where people talk and sing and make love and walk the good path, the spiritual path, the real path of human beings.
Our hymn is 318, We Would Be One.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which bends our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service with love and justice, strive to make us free.
There isn't a better hymn to meet this moment. As the world announces in 100 ways every day that we dare not linger, for our walk is not yet ended. All the words of the hymn speak to the final vision and river of people, the poem shared by our chorus of readers so beautifully. Villages and towns where people walk the good path, the spiritual path, the real path of human beings. To achieve that vision, we have to help those already being swept along in the current, but also search upriver to find and address the problems at the source. Could that vision be more fully realized if we become partners in building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community that accountably dismantles racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions, as the proposed 8th principle states? Is journeying towards spiritual wholeness what calls us in this time and place as a congregation? Could such a path bind our hearts and point us on our way, as the hymn urges? With the support and rich programming of Beloved Conversations Among, we will spend the next several months exploring questions like these together in many different ways. Shortly, Mary Kay will tell you a bit more about what your Among team has been preparing. And we have partners, too, in over 200 congregations who've already voted for the adoption of the 8th principle. Here is Reverend Sarah Lawal sharing about the experience of the Boise, Idaho Unitarian Universalist Fellowship.
I'm the Reverend Sarah Lawal, and I serve the congregation in Boise, Idaho. And I'm grateful for the invitation to chat with you today about the 8th principle. Our congregation passed the principle, we adopted it a year ago this month, so it's been a whole year for us. And we learned some really valuable lessons in the process, and we continue that learning even today. So I'm really honored to be sharing some of that learning with you. When we were first holding some congregational conversations about the principle, I remember one member spoke up and asked all of us, what would it say about us if we didn't pass it? And that was a really hallmark moment for us, to really remind ourselves that the principle was an invitation. And it was an invitation offered by Unitarian Universalist leaders of color in their process of creating the language. And so it invited us to really check ourselves and to ask the bigger question about the importance of this work and our commitment as Unitarian Universalists, and set aside the smaller details that pushed our own buttons or words we didn't like, and to really stay with the language as presented. And another important learning that we had along the way in the process of adoption was reminding one another about the story of our Unitarian Universalist principles and how our principles are relatively new in our history of Unitarian Universalism, crafted to help us understand and be able to speak about who we are, who we want to be in the world, and what commitments we want to make, but that they are part of our living tradition. One of the hallmarks of our faith is that truth is not fixed or sealed and is ever unfolding, and our principles represent that. So it's really easy for us to get attached to them as is. This is what brought me here. This is what I love about our faith, our 7 principles. But it's important for us to remember that really the work of adopting a new principle, of living into the principles, is honoring our living tradition. And I hope that that work continues. And I hope that it continues as an association, because it invites us to shift and change over time as our own communities are changing, as the world is changing, as language is changing around us. It allows us to be more nimble and more responsive to the moment. Another important learning for us was that the language really allowed us to have an anchor to the work. The language of the 8th principle around spiritual wholeness, accountably dismantling systems of racism and other oppressions, and building the multicultural beloved community. It really gave us clear vision of what we wanted to work toward. So that as we were engaging the work, we had a way to ask ourselves, how are we going to live into that? How are we going to live into dismantling systems of white supremacy, to dismantling our own racism in accountable ways? How are we going to live in to the invitation of multicultural beloved community? And what we also really helped each other learn in this process was the goal of adopting the 8th principle was about our own intentionality and our own learning, and not because the outcome needed to be that we became a more diverse congregation. Of course, if we become a more diverse congregation because we've been engaged in the work, that would be fabulous. But that's not our aim. Our aim is to engage in the work, and the work takes time. The kind of reflection that it takes to really understand how systems of white supremacy, racism, and oppression show up in our own inner lives, in the inner workings of our church communities and in our wider community, is hard work. It's emotional work. It can be taxing, but it's vital, critical work to really living into the fullest possible vision of who we can be as Unitarian Universalists. The language became another really important anchor for us this past summer after the murder of George Floyd and the racial justice uprisings. And thanks to the work of our racial justice ministry team, they've really kept us moving forward in our conversations and in our learning and in our work in the community in remarkable ways. And I think those two moments have really shined a light on how critical this work is in this time. And that's reflected in how many conversations and congregations are taking on this work nationally, and that our Unitarian Universalist Association is also dedicating itself to the work of dismantling white supremacy in its own systems and supporting congregations in doing so. So it's exciting that this project can really be an integrated approach with one another in covenant and with our larger association. Some of the wonderful organic outcomes of adopting the principle have been that it's allowed us to use that lens of dismantling white supremacy and racism to look at all of our spaces. And so we've made intentional commitments to center voices of color in our worship services weekly with at least one piece of liturgy. Our board is exploring our governance and bylaws and end statements through the lens of racism. And wow, are we learning a lot about how our own systems further structures of white supremacy rather than dismantle them. So we're really working on all of that. We're looking at how we can center the work on building right relationships with Indigenous communities. And these are conversations that are bubbling up in meaningful and surprising ways all throughout the church. And our next step in this process is to really capture all of that as we launch a Live the Eighth initiative, really inviting teams and individuals to help us codify what's working right now, where have we seen success, and what commitments do we want to continue making in the future. We're really delighted that you are on this journey towards the eighth principle as a congregation. And please know we are here to support you and cheer you on in any way that we can. And we're here to bounce ideas off of each other and support each other in this work alongside our Unitarian Universalist Association. Thanks for this opportunity and good luck to all of you.
Living the way. I love that. Please join me in the next reading, The Way, by Scottish poet Edwin Murr, whose poem often suggests, all of his poetry really suggests, as this one does, that life is a journey, not a destination. Friend, I have lost the way. The way leads on. Is there another way? The way is on. I must retrace the track. It's lost and gone. Back, I must travel back. None goes there, none. Then I'll make my place here. The road runs on. Stand still and set my face. The road leads on. Stay here, forever stay. None stays here, none. I cannot find the way. The way leads on. Oh, the place I've passed. That journey's done. And what will come at last? The way leads on. And our next hymn is in the Teal hymnal, 1017, Building a New Way.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
All right. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln is embarking on the next phase of our journey of justice. As Maya Angelou reminds us, no one can be free until we're all free. We'd like to invite you to work with us this spring. I'm back in the summer, aren't I? This late winter and spring, to imagine creative ways our congregation can take this journey together, as well as to imagine practices that are needed for change to occur. Over the next month, our slogan may well be, when we know better, we can do better. In the gallery, you'll find 4 sources of information. A handout entitled The Eighth Principle at a Glance, which we hope will begin to answer some of your questions. You'll also find copies, I think, of the Eighth Principle Resource Guide that will lead us to a more in-depth understanding of the principle. There are some wonderful links in there.
It will be online,
Online Thursday?
The resource guide will be online until it's complete.
Okay, so check online. Maybe we can put the link in the, okay. A calendar of events is also available, showing discussions and groups and movies and events and field trips over the coming months that may be of interest to you. It will also be online, where it will be updated as we receive more information. Please note that the first film will be this coming Saturday afternoon at 2:00, The Summer of Soul. And lastly, for this morning, but there'll be more to come, the first learning circle I see is scheduled for today after the service. So look for Judy Hart in the gallery, probably out by the tree. Love is powerful. Let love be our message for the world. Go in peace. And thank you all for coming and showing up.